lumière du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
There's a lot of competition for the worst thing this administration has done since they've had power. I mean, for starters, how about running the worst coronavirus response of any industrialized country in the world, killing 131,000 Americans in the process, and heading into month 7 of this crisis, with Americans still not even reliably able to be tested for the virus. I mean, that's a pretty good competitor for worst thing they have done. That's got to be a front runner, right? But the competition is stiff. How about botching the response to Hurricane Maria, which killed 3,000 Americans in Puerto Rico, and then blaming Puerto Rico and cutting off their funding and support in the aftermath of the hurricane? That was a pretty good competitor as well. Here's another, though, a crowd favorite. Another competitor for the worst thing they've done. How about soliciting, accepting, and trying to leverage further help from the Russian government to help Trump's election effort against Hillary Clinton, then spending his entire 4 years in office doing every single thing the Russian government wanted from him, and then firing, demonizing, and trying to criminalize everybody in intelligence and law enforcement who was involved in investigating what happened there? I mean, all of those three things, the coronavirus, the Hurricane Maria stuff, the Russia stuff, those are all just so terrible. And not just so terrible, but so nuts and unprecedented that we weren't even prepared to defend ourselves against those things for the most part. There's another top contender, though, that was, I think, foreseeable. At least people in the Obama administration told me to worry about it before it happened. And that's the thing that Trump has overseen in terms of the rule of law, the end of the independent Justice Department, its transformation into a tool that both hunts the president's enemies and protects and rewards the president's criminal allies. Right? That maybe should have been foreseeable. Should also be noted that's the one that rushes you right to the end of history in terms of your status as a rule of law country. And so there's lots and lots of competition if you are trying to rank the worst things they have done, the most damage they have done to our country and to the American experiment. Lots of competition. But here's the one. Here's the one where if you are a person who believes in hell, you have to think this is the one for which multiple Trump administration officials are most likely to spend eternity in cosmic penance and damnation. This is the one that'll be in the first paragraph of the obituaries of many different people in this administration, no matter how long they live and no matter what else they do with their lives. Because they will never do anything else as morally consequential as what they did here. And this is one thing that will never slide off of our conscience as a country. And this is something we first found out the specifics of below the fold on the front page of the New York Times on April 21st, 2018. Over 700 children taken from parents at the border. The New York Times was first to report on 700 kids who had been separated by policy from their parents after crossing the southern border. The White House had carefully guarded that number. They'd insisted that kids being taken away from their families, that was very rare. The number was actually very low. But it turns out it wasn't low. It was north of 700. And it turned out the White House had been keeping track. As of April 2018, more than 700 kids. And the contours of that story from there on out are familiar and still to this day almost unspeakably terrible. Right? Little kids taken away from their moms and dads. Babies and toddlers and teenagers taken from their moms and dads and sent to live in jail-like conditions, sleeping on the floor under space blankets by order of the federal government in the name of us, the American people. It was an early but unspeakably ugly chapter of this administration that will never be forgotten in history. But there's a part of the story we did not know until right now. This is new. It's from a book that comes out tomorrow that's called Separated, Inside an American Tragedy. It's a book written by my dear colleague, NBC News and MSNBC congressional correspondent Jacob Soboroff, who was on the forefront of reporting the child separation story. In this fairly stunning new book from Jacob, he has broken news about what happened after the New York Times first reported on the list of kids the Trump administration was keeping to track how many of them had been taken away from their parents. And this piece of the book is about a Trump official named Scott Lloyd. Scott Lloyd was in charge of keeping the list of kids who had been taken away from their parents. And for the first time, Jacob Soboroff reveals in his new book what happened when Scott Lloyd, this Trump administration official, saw his list. This list of the separated kids reported on the front page of the New York Times. This is how Jacob reports it in his new book. Quote, "The reporting in the New York Times made Scott Lloyd irritated. He was left to stew about the leak over the weekend. Embarrassed, Scott Lloyd knew the leak came from his department on his watch under an administration that appointed him to his position. When considering how to handle the fallout from the leak, Lloyd's first thought was a drastic one. Quote, let's get rid of the list. If he followed the idea through, it would destroy the critical linkage between these 700 separated children in his custody and their parents, despite the fact that the list itself was the best hope of ever reuniting them. Scott Lloyd knew that in order to discard the list, he'd have to instruct his staff to do so. Lloyd wanted to hear from them before deciding on a course of action. Once back in the office, he queried his staff. He asked them, quote, why are we keeping this list? Can't we just email with Department of Homeland Security on a case-by-case basis? You see the problem this created. How can we prevent another leak? He wanted to destroy the list because it looked bad publicity. Might get him in trouble. Destroying that list would have made it nearly impossible for those kids to have ever been put back with their parents ever again. But hey, maybe it would have made the story go away. The story obviously did not go away. Neither did the policy. The list of several hundreds of kids taken away from their parents turned into a list of several thousand. You might remember after all the public outcry and disgust about this policy, the Trump administration said, okay, yeah, fine, we'll stop doing that. They haven't actually stopped doing it. Since the quote-unquote end of family separations, more than 1,000 more kids have been taken away from their parents at the southern border and put into U.S. government custody in our name. And those are just the kids that we know about. The White House is not doing this in the open anymore. This time they're doing it quietly. Which is, of course, important to know just on its face, right? That taking little kids from their moms and dads is operational policy in this country. It's still in effect. But it's also important for another reason, one that Jacob smartly underlines in his new book. Part of that is that this whole idea was supposed to deter people from trying to emigrate into this country, right? Well, if you're doing it secretly, how exactly are you deterring them? Right? Even on its face in terms of your own explanation for this. If you were doing this secretly and trying to get away with it without people knowing about it, how exactly are you using this policy to keep people from coming into this country?
It is Tuesday, the 7th of July of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Oh, it always has, and it always will. Hey, looks like the protocol that the Trump administration is going to embark upon because of the Russians putting bounties on U.S. soldiers' heads is to go after the people who leaked that information. Oh, my God. Because we're going to find out Trump's getting a cut. So you got to go after the leakers. You don't want that coming out in the middle, towards the end of the election season. I mean, November's coming up quick. And Barr has an October surprise, and he doesn't want to have to deal with Trump getting caught taking a cut of bounties on U.S. soldiers' heads. You know that he is. Everything Russian, everything. What is it about this guy? And then if you mention anything about it, the maggots will go, oh, you believe the Russian hoax. Well, you don't have to even look at it as a belief system, okay? Just look at the evidence, all right? Not once has he ever taken Vlad to task, but Reality Winner is still in jail, wasting away. How is it that we would know nothing of any of this if it hadn't been for Reality Winner? And of course she's got to go to jail. And trust me, when it's time for her term to be up, they're going to keep her in longer because that's what they do. They'll find something else. It's like being on Facebook and getting suspended. Your 30 days comes up and all of a sudden they piggybacked another thing that you said that has nothing to do with the charge that they're suspending you over. The algorithm says Reality Winner has to stay. And, I don't know. Flynn doesn't have to go at all. The traitors walk free. The patriots who expose the treason are in jail. And Trump is out there talking about law and order. The destruction of American ideals by godless liberals? Please. You know, I've mentioned, just today as a matter of fact, if you're a maggot upset at the destruction of American ideals, well, stop doing it. This guy that you're following has never cared about America. You got Tucker Carlson being floated as a presidential wannabe. Are you serious? Will he wear a bow tie again? Tucker Carlson out there calling Tammy Duckworth a loser. She hates America. Yeah, right. She's a loser because she lost both her legs in service to her country, but Trump is a winner because he kept his bone spurs by avoiding his service. Which goes to what I think is the great draw that Trump has. Every single one of these people do what they condemn others of doing. I mentioned yesterday, as a matter of fact, and this is a true story, I have never collected welfare. I have never collected food stamps. I never went through a government training program like CETA. Remember that back in the day? That's how old I am. Sit around and watch film strips and get paid $180 for 2 weeks? Man, that was free money. I didn't do it. Jeez, I just went out and got a job. Don't need to be trained. Please. So I never did CETA. I never took a government handout. And I've never gamed the government for a government loan. But every single one of my maggot family members and every single one of my maggot neighbors has. Every single one. And yet, is the liberals bleeding this country dry. They all they want to do is spend. Well, Trump and his cronies got your paycheck protection plan money. And I didn't take that $1,200 handout either. All right? I didn't take the one back, like during Bush's time. There was some sort of government handout. I didn't take that either. Godless liberals, all they want to do is just take. When really, it's supposed godless liberals, because none of us are really godless. It's funny that a guy who never showed any piety at any point in his life is now the great religious leader of the Christo-fascist right wing, white wing of America. So they're going to go after the leakers who leaked the fact that Vlad has put bounties on U.S. soldiers, and Trump can't say anything bad to Vlad, but he's going to go after the Americans who exposed this as if they are the criminals. Tear down a Confederate statue, you get 10 years. Tear down the statue of Frederick Douglass, not a word. Not a word. Yesterday I reported on a mob of Nazis Russian Nazis, by the way. 7 arrested out of a group of about 20. And they were all Russians from Washington County, Washington. And I love the symmetry of this. Then they went to Lincoln City. Washington County, Washington, Lincoln City. Do you get what's going on here? And then they harassed a black family on Independence Day with Nazi salutes. And then tried to get into a fight with the cops while shooting airborne exploding fireworks over the cops' heads while they're trying to duke it out. Any word from Trump about some very fine people took on our law enforcement because those law enforcement people are jackboots? Wait a second. There are jackboots. I bet the cops were kind of confused about what to do. Nah, maybe the Lincoln City cops are okay. I don't know. But I think it was the state cops that showed up. Lincoln City's not close to Portland either. When they say it's about 85 miles, southwest, it's quite a ways when you think about it, because you got to drive along the gorge, or you got to go down by, I don't know, Burlingame, Hillsboro, somewhere around there, and then head out, and get down below Seaside. It's not close. No word. Oh, but he is insisting that Bubba Wallace apologize for the news that Bubba Wallace never reported. It was the president of NASCAR who reported it, and Bubba Wallace is supposed to apologize for the hoax. Apparently that news had been there for, this is what they're saying, the news had been there for some time as a door pull. Yeah, but Bubba Wallace hadn't been in that part of the facility with the noose. Please. And Trump saying that someone who didn't have anything to do except being the victim of it should apologize because of a supposed hoax, because that's what Trump's bar-led FBI concluded. Yeah, they say the FBI got there and they concluded that, it's just a door pull. Sounds like it's Barr's FBI. That rogue office of anti-Hillary haters, or Hillary haters. They wouldn't be anti-Hillary haters because that means they wouldn't hate Hillary. What do they mean by that? Those rogue FBI agents in the Manhattan office that hate Hillary. To add balance to the Southern District of New York Attorney's Office. That rogue agency. So independent, going after real criminals, by the way. They went after Gotti and got him. So the Trump administration is going to go after the leakers. They're going to make a reality winner of whoever, or the group of people who expose the fact that Vlad has bounties on U.S. Soldiers. It's looking more and more like Trump's getting a cut. Look, if you're going to come after my soldiers, I need a little taste. I need, you gotta give me something for my beak. That's like mob talk. I saw it on, I think, Gangs of New York. Or maybe it was Godfather 2, when De Niro plays the young Don Corleone. Well, there is so much news out there. It's just coming fast and furious. People are dying. Youngsters are dying from COVID. I thought the heat of summer was supposed to take it away, not increase it. Yeah, everything that Trump said, you better think the opposite of that happening then. I mean, that's the Trump translator. We've known that for a long time, too. What else is on the menu here? Starting off in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Well, at the top, a new book by Soberoff reveals even more of the depravity of the Trump administration family separation policy. Oh, speaking of which, Katie Miller, yeah, you little Naziette. I'd like to see you separated and put in an icebox baby gulag. And, that's the way it should be. All right. We got a space for you all reserved, and it will be done. It will. On the rest of the menu, extremist white evangelical churches received almost $20 million in PPP loans for being small-minded businesses. Of course, big mega corporations, including Trump's personal friends, not necessarily they are big mega corporations, but big mega corporations and some of Trump's, even Trump himself, collected PPP funds. How is that possible? The number of confirmed coronavirus cases in Arizona has now surpassed 100,000, and younger people, not the elderly, have comprised more than half of them. More than half. And a former conservative operative caught in a honey trap with convicted Russian agent Maria Butina was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison for wire fraud and money laundering. Good riddance. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Britain imposed sanctions on 25 Russians and 20 Saudis aimed at stopping the laundering of blood money. Because, it's convenient blood money. Let's be clear. And a Russian journalist was convicted in Moscow on charges of condoning terrorism and ordered to pay a fine in a case that was widely criticized as an attack on freedom of speech. Well, I think it's freedom of the press, too. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. Hopefully you'll locate the link to our Patreon page, because we are really unable to do this without you. As Tom will tell you in just a bit, though the bulk of how we keep this powerhouse of resisting comes out of our own wallets, but we would not be able to even do that if it wasn't for you, because you are indeed our largest contributor. And I don't mean by size, I mean by volume. Okay, please. Mass. It's really more about mass. And thank you so much for being there for us, because, I don't know, we're obsessive about our civic duty here at Netroots Radio. And because, unlike how Trump puts it, we love America. We love America so much we want to save her. Yeah, we want to save the United States. I don't know, call us paternalistic or just call us, patriots. Because that's how we take our civic duty seriously, even though we kind of joke around. But if you could afford the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds our way, we are able to stretch those dollars beyond compare. Even quantum mechanics are unable to determine how we are able to do it, but we are, and we have. And the proof is in the pudding. Almost 10 years of Resistance Radio. And we have you to thank for allowing us to continue. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam because I insist. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on social media, except for Facebook, because Zuckerberg and his algorithm, I don't know. Should have taken a couple of humanities classes before you dropped out of Harvard to weaponize a Rita Babe pictorial site. And make more money than God. Does God have money? The prosperity gospel apparently thinks that he does, but I think God I think in her infinite wisdom, those kinds of possessions are meaningless in the greater expanse of the universe, you would think. Okay, if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Okay, let's jump into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Oh, one bit of warning for those of you who are unaware. Every chowder, whether it be Tarrytown Chowder or any other that we may come up with, here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy has roasted corn in it. I'm trying to get that out, because I love roasted corn. It caramelizes, a little sweet, a little roasted kind of flavor there. It's good. Try it sometime. It really, it adds body. Really, some real substance to your chowder. Elena Shore of the Associated Press brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe. Churches connected to Trump and other organizations linked to current or former Trump evangelical advisors received at least $17.3 million. I call that almost 20 mil, because if it's at least 17.3, it could be almost or more than 20 mil, because you know how these guys work. Now, they say that these are in loans from a federal rescue package designed to aid small businesses during the coronavirus pandemic. Loans? Nah, I think it's a handout. They're not paying it back. Those receiving these, quote, loans include City of Destiny, the Florida church that Trump's personal pastor and White House faith advisor, Paula White Cain. Cain? She has the mark of Cain and she's running a church? Well, I always knew it. And she calls that home. And the First Baptist Dallas, led by Trump ally and senior pastor Robert Jeffress. Well, he's a grifter, too. Oh, boy. City of Destiny got between $150,000 and $350,000 from the Paycheck Protection Program, and First Baptist Dallas got between $2 and $5 million, according to data released by the Treasury Department. Data, I should add, that München's been trying to suppress all along. I wonder why. Loan recipients loan payments received by churches and other organizations linked to Trump's evangelical allies, of course, represent just a small fraction of the total aid the program gave to religious entities, which were allowed to access pandemic assistance loans, even if they performed only faith-based functions. But trust me, it sure as hell wasn't any Muslim group, and it sure as hell wasn't any Sikh group, and it sure wasn't any Jainist group, and it sure as hell, well, it was Scientology. Huh. QAnon and Scientology. I wonder what's the connection there. Oh, what? You have to wonder? Jeffress noted that in establishing the relief program, the Trump administration, as well as Congress, you mean Republicans in the Senate, please, Robert, not only allowed houses of worship to take part, but encouraged applications for aid out of an understanding that houses of worship are not only ministries, but they are employers. Really? You're a business? Then maybe you ought to be taxed. Well, the number of loan recipients connected to religious supporters of Trump, however, illustrates the potential pitfalls for churches and other faith-based groups that opted to pursue the financial aid amid questions about blurring the line between church and state. Don't worry when you get to the Roberts court, and I'm talking about the John Balls and Strikes Roberts, but he never calls a foul ball on any of the home team Roberts. That John Roberts, when he gets to his court, don't worry. They've already blurred the lines between church and state now that we get to throw tax dollars at private. Religious schools have been wanting them ever since before I was part of a parochial school myself. Government data shows Jeffress's church reported retaining 293 jobs with its loan, while Prestonwood Christian Academy in Plano, Texas, reported retaining 0 jobs with its loan of between $2 and $5 million. That school is associated with Prestonwood Baptist Church, where senior pastor Jack Graham is a longtime Trump backer who wrote an op-ed lauding the president's anti-abortion credentials in January. He wasn't always so anti-abortion, especially when he was paying off strippers and hookers and porn stars that might have accidentally been impregnated with his seed. God, makes me kind of shiver just thinking about it. Other program beneficiaries connected to veteran evangelical Trump allies include the Faith and Freedom Coalition, founded by conservative strategist Ralph Reed. Well, you know what's this? These are all the usual suspects. I mean, if you dig in here, I bet Abramoff got some of this money with some, I don't know, maybe a gambling church on Indian property. The ever-present and overworked anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The number of confirmed coronavirus cases in Arizona has now surpassed 100,000. And younger people, not the elderly, have comprised more than half of them. The Department of Health and of Health Services said in a statement that more than 62,000 of the 441,000 reported cases involve people younger than 44. DHS Director Dr. Kara Christ said it's those between ages 20 and 44 who can drive community spread of COVID-19. And they're the groups who went out to Arizona's bars and nightclubs en masse after Doug Ducey, their stupid governor, ended his stay-home orders in mid-May. The governor closed nightclubs and gyms again last week in an effort to slow the surge of virus cases, which have nearly doubled in the past 2 weeks. Those younger people often show no or only minor symptoms and can unknowingly spread the disease. More concerning, Chris said, they can bring it home to their older parents or grandparents who are at much higher risk of serious or fatal complications. It is a huge fear. Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A former conservative operative, well, he's not a former conservative, but he's a former conservative operative who was once romantically linked to a Russian agent, was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison in South Dakota. Paul Erickson pleaded guilty to wire fraud and money laundering as part of fraudulent investment schemes he operated for many years. Erickson was not charged in connection to his romantic relationship with Maria Butina, who was deported in October after admitting she sought to infiltrate conservative U.S. political groups and promote Russia's agenda. And just as a reminder, Reality Winner is still in jail for exposing it all. Prosecutors said Erickson concocted multiple investment schemes from 1996 to August of 2018. Gee, I wonder why he was chosen as part of their plan of active measures that Vlad had in mind. What could it have been that they could have compromised him for and over? And his schemes included recruiting investors for a string of elder care homes, developing a wheelchair that allowed a person to use the bathroom from the chair, and home building at North Dakota's booming oil fields. He operated the schemes from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Judge Karen Schreier listed former classmates, family members, and even Erickson's godmother as victims of his investment schemes. You're a thief, and you have betrayed your friends and family, pretty much everyone you know. Well, yeah. I guess if you're caught in a honey trap because you're a crook and you move in conservative circles, wow, there's a lot of those, isn't there? Did you notice that the active measures have never really been directed at Democratic candidates and the party en masse? Yeah, we have a few of our grifters, but only a few. I want to know how many rubles are in the coffers of the Senate Republicans. I would. Okay, this guy Erickson has had a long time moving about and grifting on and with other conservatives. So read the article here out of the AP. Link provided in the show notes. Let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, you do know we will go through weather from around the world, and you must know that we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Annie Sneed. They give us paper and fuel, as well as vital ecological services like cleaning the air, storing carbon, and providing habitat. We're talking about trees, of course. But changes in the environment, largely caused by humans, appear to be causing profound transformations in trees around the world. In a new study, scientists reviewed global research on trends in tree birth, growth, and death. They combined those data with an analysis of deforestation, and they found that worldwide, older trees are dying at higher rates than in the past, due to factors like rising air temperature, wildfires, drought, and pathogens.
Most of the drivers of that decrease of large old trees are increasing themselves, such as temperatures going up, droughts are more severe, wildfires, windstorms, and deforestation are all, although variable across the globe, they're generally increasing. And so both the loss has already occurred, but we expect more continued loss of big old trees.
Nate McDowell, an earth scientist at Pacific Northwest National Lab, who is one of the study's authors.
So if we have an increasing rate of death, particularly of the larger, older trees, what's left are the younger trees. So that's why, on average, through the loss of bigger, older trees, our forests are becoming inherently younger and shorter.
This is a problem because old trees are vitally important.
For sure, the increase in death does limit the carbon storage of an ecosystem and can force a system to become a carbon source to the atmosphere. The second reason we care is from biodiversity perspective. Old growth trees tend to house a higher biodiversity than young forests do. And the third reason is aesthetic. As a society, we care about these trees. We have national parks named after big trees. And so there's a personal reason for people to care about this as well.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Annie Sneed.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1998. That was the first day of a 48-hour general strike in Puerto Rico. The strike was called in support of telephone workers who had walked off the job 3 weeks earlier. The workers were protesting government plans to sell off the publicly owned telephone service to GTE, a private company based out of Connecticut. As the strike of the telephone workers continued, more and more Puerto Ricans rallied to their cause. A general strike was endorsed by more than 50 unions, along with other civic, political, and religious groups. The group of organizations leading the strike went by the acronym CHAOS. For 2 days, the general strike shut down almost all activity in the nation. Work at stores, banks, and the halls of government ground to a halt. Transportation ground to a halt as bus drivers and taxi cab drivers took to the picket lines. Many in the crowd waved Puerto Rican flags. In the streets, the chant could be heard, "Hilga, Hilga," or "Strike, strike." Many also chanted, "Never surrender. The telephone company belongs to the people." The strike won support outside of Puerto Rico as well. The Health and Hospital Workers Union 1199 in New York issued a statement of solidarity and a $100,000 donation to help support the cause. After the success and support of the general strike, the telephone workers remained on the picket line. The strike wore on for 41 days. In the end, GTE won the day. The company promised not to retaliate against any striking workers. But when they took over, the company reduced staffing through so-called voluntary layoffs and early retirements. This is yet another chapter in the fight against privatization.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Another day, another COVID record broken.
We're number one, damn it!
The U.S. death toll from COVID-19 rose above 130,000 on Monday after coronavirus hospitalizations increased by 5% or more in 23 states. Texas reported that it had more than 8,000 hospitalized coronavirus patients on Sunday. Yep, another record for that state. Public health experts consider hospitalizations to be a better indication of the severity of local outbreaks because they don't vary based on testing availability the way tallies of infections do. Dr. Anthony Fauci noted Monday that the average age of new coronavirus patients had dropped by roughly 15 years as cases surged in the nation's Sunbelt, and warned the U.S. remained, quote, knee-deep in the virus's first wave, saying, quote, it's a serious situation that we have to address immediately. Now, with virtually zero federal guidance on how to deal with the pandemic, states and cities continue to grapple with its spread. Some moved on Monday to roll back phased business reopenings, at the same time that schools and universities announced adjustments to resume classes in the fall. Texas, Florida, and Arizona, 3 states hit really hard by the virus, each saw new milestone infection numbers on Monday. Texas and Florida both passed 200,000 reported COVID-19 cases, while Arizona's total topped 100,000, with confirmed cases doubling within the last 2.5 weeks. Remember the PPP? Yeah, the government's Paycheck Protection Program that ostensibly made billions of dollars available to small businesses to keep their employees on the payroll during the shutdown? Remember how Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin tried to keep the names of the companies who got the money secret? Well, thankfully, he was unsuccessful in that bit of subterfuge. The Treasury Department's Paycheck Protection Program authorized $520 billion for nearly 5 million mostly small businesses and nonprofits. We now have access to the names and some other details on those who were approved for $150,000 or more. And the list includes many you probably wouldn't have expected. Oh, and it helped to have White House connections. Who's on the list? Well, Kanye West's clothing line, the sculptor Jeff Koons, law firms and high-dollar hedge funds, major restaurant chains, the Girl Scouts, political groups on both sides of the aisle, the nonprofit organization that puts on the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. As much as $273 million in federal aid was awarded to more than 100 companies that are owned or operated by major donors to Donald Trump's election efforts. This all according to an Associated Press analysis of government data. Many of the Trump-connected businesses were among the first to be approved for a loan in early April, and churches connected to Trump and other organizations linked to current or former Trump evangelical advisors received at least $17.3 million in loans from the rescue package. Some of them include the City of Destiny, the Florida church that Trump's personal pastor and White House faith advisor Paula White Cain calls home, and First Baptist Dallas, led by Trump ally and senior pastor Robert Jeffress. Oh, and the Daily Caller took a loan for between $350,000 and $1 million. So there's that. Well, we're still waiting for the Supreme Court to issue its final rulings for the term that officially ended last week. On Monday, with 8 cases still to be decided, they released 2 decisions. In the bigger one, the court ruled unanimously that 538 people picked to cast votes in the Electoral College must vote according to their state's laws. The case involved 4 faithless electors from Colorado and Washington state who strayed from the popular vote and sued, arguing that states can control how electors are chosen, but not what happens later. Justice Elena Kagan, writing for the court, said the Constitution gives states broad authority over the selection of presidential electors, including, quote, what the elector must do for the appointment to take effect. Under more than 2 centuries of tradition, Kagan wrote, quote, electors are not free agents. They are to vote for the candidate whom the state voters have chosen. The ruling marked a defeat for advocates of electoral college reform. The other decision announced Monday had to do with robocalls to cell phones. It was a complicated ruling that basically says all robocalls to cell phones are unconstitutional. Yeah, we'll see. And finally, in a historic defeat for the Trump administration, a federal judge in Washington ordered a complete shutdown of the Dakota Access Pipeline, more commonly known as the Keystone XL Pipeline. Judge James Boasberg found the U.S. government violated federal environmental law when it approved construction without a full environmental study. Now the judge has given the pipeline company 30 days to empty the pipeline and shut it down by August 5th. The Trump administration could appeal the judge's decision, and knowing who they are, they probably will. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener-supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, expected to have a high similar to yesterday in the low to mid-80s, though it was more on the low side, which was very pleasant. You know, in other parts of the country, I always considered this to be a heat wave. Now it's just pleasantly cool. Okay, partly cloudy skies for most of the day, and winds will be out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. A few passing clouds tonight, lows in the mid-50s with winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tomorrow we will see some clouds in the morning that will give way to mainly sunny skies in the afternoon. Highs in the mid-80s, and it could be a little hotter. All right, well, as I alluded to yesterday, or implied, or actually just said, we didn't have an accurate count for the weekend coronavirus numbers, but we do have them now. And the confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County of Southern Oregon has jumped from 131 to 152. So, you know, I really don't want my mom to go out and socially distance among a bunch of people who don't wear masks. Once again, went to the store, and there are mandated mask rules here in this state, and people are flaunting them. Pretty soon the public shaming will start happening. Of course, I must notice that a lot of them have guns. They'll wear guns, but they won't wear a mask. You would think in the West, you know, since they're crooks and outlaws, that would be a fashion statement to wear a mask, but no. Well, we have a small chance of rain today, but I don't think that it will occur, about 10%, so that's a smidgen. We always like to look at even the smallest as a hope. Grass pollen, though, is high right outside the window of the mothership here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the Rogue River Valley region is good at 27 parts per million. And that daytime UV index still remains very high at 9. Take care with that number, SP50 or more. Do they have more? Maybe. Oh, barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.14 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles. And relative humidity is at 88%. So who knows? Maybe we might have a small chance of some kind of precipitation. I doubt it. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 68 and mostly cloudy. Gay Paris is 77 and sunny. Oh, how lovely. Too bad there's a coronavirus pandemic going on, even in the City of Light. Rome is 90 degrees and sunny, and surprisingly without a heat advisory that would shut down critical infrastructure, and you can't even sit on the Spanish Steps and have a gelato now, darn it, without fear of a pandemic called coronavirus infecting your lungs. Kyiv is 73 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 77 and fair. Hong Kong is 81 and mostly cloudy with a chance of heads being bopped by cops with the new security law that gives them unbridled power. Tokyo is 80 degrees and cloudy with a thunderstorm and lightning advisory that could impact critical infrastructure. Not to mention the floods. Sydney, Australia is 55 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and sunny. And New York is probably a muggy 78 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Elizabeth Piper and Andy Bruce of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Britain imposed sanctions on 25 Russians and 20 Saudis as part of a post-Brexit measure. Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said were aimed at stopping the laundering of blood money. Well, I should add, this is using the Magnitsky Act as it should be. Now, after leaving the EU in January, Boris Johnson wants to forge a new independent role for Britain in foreign and trade affairs, and this was the first time London could impose asset freezes and visa bans independently. Raab has pressed for tough sanctions and set out the first names in Parliament, including Russian nationals Britain says were involved in the mistreatment and death of lawyer Sergei Magnitsky, and Saudis held to be involved in the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Foreign said it would respond to the new measures. The Saudi government media office and foreign ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment because they're trying to, cut it up into smaller bite-sized portions so that they can figure it out, maybe. If you're a kleptocrat or an organized criminal, you will not be able to launder your blood money in this country, Raab told Parliament.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Vladimir Isachanov of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Russian journalist was convicted yesterday, Monday, on charges of condoning terrorism and ordered to pay a fine in a case that has been widely criticized as an attack on freedom of speech. The court in the city of Pskov found Svetlana Prokopyeva guilty of justifying terrorism and ordered her to pay a fine of about $6,900 U.S. Prosecutors had asked for a 6-year prison sentence for her. Speaking to several dozen journalists and supporters who waited for her outside the court building, Prokopyeva thanked them for their backing. If it were not for you, I would not have walked out of here like that, she said with a smile. It's your achievement that I'm walking out here without a police convoy. The case of Prokopyeva stems from a commentary she published in the wake of an October 2018 suicide attack in which a 17-year-old Russian man blew himself up at the entrance of the FSB in the northern city of Arkhangelsk. The attacker was killed, and 3 FSB officers were injured. In her commentary, Prokopyeva criticized repressive government policies, arguing that they leave little chance for young people to express their discontent and drive them to despair. Obviously, she is an enemy of the state. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. Of course, you do know that Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yeah, it'll be Wednesday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.